Moving to a new city is never easy, especially in the middle of college. I transferred to a small school in Portland, Oregon. From day one, I felt like I didn't belong. Everyone already had their friend groups, and I was just another outsider. The workload was overwhelming. Figuring out a new routine, new grocery stores, new bus routes, new everything, only made it worse. I missed my old life. I missed my old friends. One Saturday, I decided to take a break and head to Walmart to restock on groceries. I loaded up my cart with the usual: bread, some eggs, milk, and some frozen meals for lazy nights. I even grabbed ingredients for chicken Alfredo. It was my comfort food. I figured I deserved something nice after the week I'd had. At the checkout, I started unloading my cart when I noticed the guy behind me. He was tall, scruffy, and wearing a worn-out leather jacket. He seemed impatient, tapping his foot, sighing loudly. I ignored him until I fumbled with my wallet. That set him off. "Hey, can you hurry up? Some of us have places to be," he snapped. Caught off guard, I awkwardly tried to lighten the mood. "If I hurry up, will you pay my excessive bills?" I forced a laugh. He didn't laugh, he just stared at me, cold, empty. It made everything awkward. I quickly finished paying, grabbed my bags, and left. I tried to shake off the weird tension. Maybe he was just having a bad day. I was halfway home when I heard the car. It came out of nowhere, speeding down the quiet street. Before I could react, someone leaned out of the passenger window and hurled something at me. It smacked me in the face. For a split second, I thought I'd been shot, but then I smelled it. Ketchup. I stood there, stunned, as the car screeched away. My face was sticky. My clothes were ruined. My stomach burned with anger. Who the hell does something like that? Then it clicked. The guy from Walmart. Was this his idea of a joke? It seemed extreme, but I couldn't think of anyone else who'd want to mess with me. I rushed home humiliated. I scrubbed the ketchup off in the shower, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was just some drunk idiots looking for a laugh. Maybe it was nothing. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. A long hissing noise, like air leaking from a tire or gas escaping a pipe. My heart pounded as I checked the stove, the pipes, everything was fine. Then I realized the sound was coming from outside. I grabbed my flashlight. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. When I stepped outside, I froze. My window was covered in red paint. In bold, dripping letters, someone had written, "Joke's on you." My stomach dropped. Who the hell was doing this? And why? I called the police. They showed up quickly, took my statement, and said they'd look into it. But I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. Just some vandalism. Nothing to be scared of. But I was scared. I jumped at every noise. I started carrying pepper spray. I avoided Walmart altogether. 2 weeks later, the police called me. They had found something. It was surveillance footage from a neighbor's driveway. They wanted me to come in. When they showed me the image, my blood ran cold. It was the same car. The police had identified the driver. It was a man with a history of harassment. He had already served time for 2 previous offenses. He had been out of jail for only a few months. Hearing that made me sick. This wasn't some prank. It wasn't random. He had picked me. The police assured me they were doing everything they could to find him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I took different routes to class. I stopped going out at night. Every time I heard an engine outside my apartment, my heart stopped. It's been months now, and I still don't feel safe. I still think about that night. The hissing sound, the red paint, the words on my window. It's like a nightmare I can't wake up from. My dad used to drive a 1967 Chevy Impala. It was his dream car. He spent years saving up for it. He worked extra shifts and skipped nights out with his friends, all so he could buy it brand new. And when he finally got it, he treated it like his firstborn child. I grew up hearing him talk about how smooth it rode. He always said the engine purred like a beast and that nothing else on the road compared to it. But sadly, he didn't get to drive it for long. One night, out of nowhere, he got a terrible headache. It came on so fast that we barely had time to react. My mom and I rushed him to the hospital, expecting it to be something minor. The doctors said it was a sudden spike in blood pressure. They told us they would monitor him. but they didn't do enough. 3 hours later, he was gone. After the funeral, life felt like it had stopped. My mom and I barely spoke for weeks. The Impala just sat in the garage, collecting dust. It felt wrong to even look at it without him there. For nearly a year, I left it untouched. Then one weekend, my girlfriend Anna suggested something. "Let's take the Impala out for a drive," she said. At first, I wasn't sure. Driving it felt like disturbing a memory, but she gave me that look. It was the one that said I was overthinking things. "It's just a car," she said. "I think your dad would have wanted you to enjoy it." Maybe she was right. The next morning, I picked her up and we took the car for a wash. The black paint still shined even after all that time. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head, reminding me to treat her right. Before we left, I took it to Murphy's auto shop. It was the place my dad always trusted. Joe, the old mechanic there, gave it a once-over. "She's good to go," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Damn fine car. You don't see many like this anymore." With that reassurance, Anna and I packed our bags and stopped at Walmart for some snacks. Then we hit the road. Our destination was Lookout Mountain, about 2 hours from Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was a quiet drive, mostly open road. The trip started out perfect. We blasted music and took turns choosing songs. We talked about anything and everything. When we finally got to the mountain, the view was incredible. We hiked a few trails and ate the sandwiches we packed. We just enjoyed the peacefulness of it all. But the drive home was when things took a turn. It started subtly. A dark blue Camry appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then it started flashing its high beams at us. I frowned. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't swerving. Why were they trying to get my attention? I slowed down slightly, expecting them to pass, but instead they pulled up beside us. That's when I saw them. 2 guys were wearing clown masks. They were laughing and drinking from beer cans. Their music was blasting so loud that I could hear it over my own radio. One of them waved at us in an exaggerated, creepy way. Anna tensed. "What the hell?" she muttered. I ignored them, staring straight ahead. Just drunk teenagers messing around. If I didn't react, they'd get bored and move on. But then they swerved toward us. I had to jerk the wheel to avoid getting hit. My heart jumped into my throat. "What the hell are they doing?" Anna yelled. I clenched the wheel. "They're just messing with us. Let's get some distance." I pressed the gas, putting space between us. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, in my mirror, I saw another car. It was a black SUV. At first, I felt relieved, thinking maybe it was another driver who would act as a buffer between us and the Camry. But then, the SUV sped up and passed us, pulling in front. The Camry was still behind us. They were boxing us in. Anna grabbed my arm. "This isn't just some prank." I nodded, trying to keep my breathing steady. I couldn't pull over. We were in the middle of nowhere. No gas stations, no houses, just endless road and trees. The Camry pulled up beside us again. One of the masked guys held up his phone, recording us. Then he yelled something at Anna. I couldn't hear it over the music. Whatever it was, her face went pale. Then I lost it. I reached under my seat and grabbed the .38 revolver I had bought 3 years ago for protection. With one hand still on the wheel, I rolled down my window and pointed it at them. The second they saw the gun, their whole demeanor changed instantly. The guy filming dropped his phone. The driver's head snapped forward. They swerved, almost losing control before slamming on the gas and speeding ahead. The black SUV followed, and just like that, they were gone. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. My hands were still shaking. Anna let out a nervous laugh. "Holy shit!" I swallowed hard, checking my mirrors again and again. The road was empty. Anna turned to me. "What if you didn't have the gun?" I didn't answer, because I knew exactly what would have happened. When we finally pulled into my driveway, I killed the engine and just sat there, gripping the wheel. Anna placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I let out a slow breath. I didn't know how to finish the sentence. Back then, I told myself it was just a bunch of drunk idiots messing around. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just some random prank. They had 2 cars. They weren't just trying to scare us. They were trying to trap us. Even years later, I still think about that night. I think about how fast things would have turned for us if I hadn't found the gun. When I was 11 years old, my life changed in a way I could never have imagined. My dad got transferred for work, and we had to move to a small town in Tennessee. It was one of those places where everyone knew everyone, and the streets were so quiet you could hear the crickets chirping at night, and I hated it. Leaving my old school, my friends, and everything familiar behind felt like the end of the world to me. I spent the first few weeks sulking in my room, thinking about all the things I missed. Our old neighborhood, my best friend, the way my bedroom used to smell like my favorite vanilla candle. You know how kids are. Change is hard, especially when you're forced into it. But over time, I realized there was no point in arguing with my parents. So I started trying to adjust to the new environment. School was different here, smaller. The kids had all known each other forever, so being the new girl wasn't easy at first. But luckily, I made 2 new friends, and slowly things started feeling a little more normal. And then there were the teachers. Mrs. Lee, the English teacher, was my favorite. She had this warm smile that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. Mr. Carter, the math teacher, was the complete opposite. Strict, no nonsense, and impossible to please. Looking back, the guy really had a punchable face. And then there was Mr. Johnson. He was the kind of teacher everyone liked. Charming, friendly, always cracking jokes. He taught history, and he had this way of making even the most boring topics interesting. My parents met him at a school event and thought he was great. Everything was going fine until June 28, 2007. That day started like any other. School ended at 3 p.m., and I waited outside for my mom to pick me up. But 30 minutes passed, and she still wasn't there. The parking lot emptied out 1 car at a time until I was the only one left. I sat on the bench, swinging my legs and scratching at the wood with my fingernails. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. I didn't have a phone, so I had no way of contacting my mom. So I just had to wait. That's when Mr. Johnson walked up. "Hey, Allie," he said, smiling. "Still waiting for your mom?" I nodded, feeling a small wave of relief. At least I wasn't alone anymore. "I just spoke to your parents," he continued. "Your mom got stuck in traffic. I can give you a ride home if you want." I hesitated. My parents hadn't told me anything about that. I must have looked unsure because he added, "I just need to stop by my house real quick to grab some cash. I'm buying a baseball bat for the student with the highest grade this semester." He chuckled. "You're doing pretty well in class, you know. Maybe you'll win it." I felt a little guilty for doubting him. He was my teacher after all. I'd seen him talk to my parents at school events, and they liked him. My mom was still late, and I didn't want to wait outside alone anymore, so I said okay. His house was a few blocks away, small and kind of messy, but nothing seemed strange at first. There were papers and books scattered on the coffee table, dishes stacked in the sink, and a jacket draped over one of the chairs. It felt like any other house. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, heading toward the kitchen. "Want a Coke?" I nodded, figuring I'd drink the soda while I borrowed his phone to call my mom. But as I got up to ask, I saw something that made my stomach drop. He was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring powder from a plastic bag into a glass before filling it with Coke. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it, but my whole body tensed. My mind scrambled for answers. Maybe it was sugar? Maybe some kind of medicine? But then why hadn't he just done it in front of me? Why was he being so secretive about it? I suddenly wanted to be anywhere but there. I slowly backed toward the couch where my bag was, trying not to make a sound. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I needed to leave, but I didn't want to seem obvious. Then as I reached for my bag, my hand knocked over a small box. It hit the floor with a loud thud. Mr. Johnson's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto mine. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice calm, but his face was different now. I forced a smile, my mind racing for an excuse. Actually, I think my mom wanted me to wait at the school. I should probably go." I reached for my bag, but he took a step toward me. "You sure? Just stay a little longer," he said. "Your parents are expecting you here." My stomach twisted. I hadn't told him where I lived. That's when I saw it. The window on the other side of the room was open. Without thinking, I sprinted and jumped through it. I hit the ground hard, scraping my knee, but I didn't stop. Behind me, I heard him yell, "Hey, come back!" I ran across the street and into the trees, diving behind a large tree trunk. My breath came in short gasps, my chest tight with panic. Footsteps. He was following me. "Allie," he called out, "your parents are at home waiting for you. You're just overreacting. Come out, and I won't say anything about this to anyone." I pressed myself against the tree, trying not to cry. My whole body was shaking. Then silence. I waited. Had he left? Was it safe? Then suddenly, hands grabbed me from behind. I couldn't breathe. His arm wrapped around my throat, squeezing tighter as my vision blurred. My ears were ringing. My body felt weak. The last thing I remember was my legs giving out before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a dark room. My wrists were tied together, my body aching. A dim light flickered above me. I screamed for help, but no one answered. I screamed again. Then I heard footsteps, the sound of a door unlocking. I held my breath as the door creaked open. A shadow stepped inside, shining a flashlight in my face. For a second, I thought it was him, but then a voice said, "It's okay, you're safe now." It was a cop. Everything after that was a blur. He untied me, carried me outside, and suddenly my parents were there, crying and holding me. Mr. Johnson was arrested that night. The police found the history of his past crimes. I was just lucky that I made it safe. Even now, years later, I still think about what would have happened if I had drunk that Coke, if I hadn't jumped out that window.